Welcome to the Ringer NBA Live YouTube reaction show. It's game one. Logan Murdock has his bunny ears right behind me. We got Seerat, Sohi in the building, the three of us, and we're breaking down what's happening after game one. And I start with a simple question, right? We just watched this game one. Will Peyton Pritchard make a shot in this series? That is top of my mind. 0 for 6 in game one, but will he make a shot?
Well, you know, Seerat called him the run stopper all night.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
we were watching this. We were watching the whole game.
Is that the nickname? Is that canon at this point, the run stopper?
Yeah.
But let's get to the real basketball. This was a game that Jaylen Brown, leading scorer, right? The just won finals or Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Now we got Jason Tatum on a big stage, big plus minus game for him. What are our reactions Celtics wise? I'll start with you, Logan.
Well, I mean, if you were concerned about the Celtics defense, even in the slightest, they proved you wrong. They were really, really good.
Yeah.
You talk about Drew Holiday. I put him as my X factor.
Not your glue guy, X factor.
He's an X factor, not just a glue guy.
Sam Hauser,
he was great.
glue guy.
Sam Hauser was great.
Luka
If you
stopper.
were the Celtics and playing on the Celtics, you were a great defender tonight. They were really, really good. What did you think of it, Seerat?
Yeah.
Honestly, just a beatdown. It was incredible. I think the weird thing with the Celtics is we're always looking for a reason to doubt them. And I kind of had
Especially at the Ringer, apparently. Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
A lot of hate going on about the
Right.
Boston Celtics.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're like the anti-Celtics propaganda wing of the NBA. Everybody says that about the Ringer.
Well,
historically.
I brought this
Yeah.
notebook, and I was going to write down a bunch of things that happened.
What
in
is
this
the
game.
only note in that notebook?
The only things that I wrote down, game one, big game. Celtics three-point shooting, pretty good early on. That was a good note. Sam Hauser guarding Luka and Kyrie. Is he a Luka stopper?
You can put him right up there with Ruben Patterson.
Yeah, right. These are the only things of
Ty
note.
Lue.
This game was pretty much over from the jump. I mean, it was before we could even look up. You got smacked in the mouth. I mean, how does Dallas react to that moving forward?
Well, I mean, you could just, the biggest thing that you can say about this game is that it's over for the Dallas Mavericks.
Right.
Where
Jason Kidd told us that
everything
at
went
halftime,
bad.
you just got to win each quarter.
and he
then
said
you
they
can
were
win
going to win
game.
each quarter. He said we're going to win the third quarter, and then guess what? We're going to do, Seerat? We're going to win the fourth quarter. as well.
Yes.
The math
He was
didn't-
wrong on both accounts.
the
He
math
was
didn't
lying
quite
to all
math.
of our faces. 10 million people he lied to. It was a demolition. And one of the biggest things that I saw from this game was just the absence of Kyrie Irving. And that is very concerning because we were all talking in the big grand theater
Yeah,
in
it's
Spotify
beautiful.
where we watched the game at, where it wasn't just that shots weren't falling. There was something up with Kyrie that seemed to be outside of the game, right? He just seemed to be timid. Throughout the whole playoffs, he's the guy that gives you instant offense, or he was very assertive. He wasn't assertive at all throughout this second half or the first half. It was tough. We thought he was going to get going in that third quarter, and that's what the Mavericks needed in that game, right? Because Luka goes on that phenomenal run in the third quarter, and then you kind of were just hoping that Kyrie would just take the baton on there and finally, get himself going. It never happened. And I was just really concerned by the way he played, right? Or the way he missed shots. And that was the most concerning thing if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan going to game two.
Yeah, and there's a moment there where game opens and he hits a off dribble jumper over two guys, gets fouled twice. One of those is Derek White, and you're like, okay, start your engines. And also, by the way, I mean we're gonna forget this, but the Mavericks started off, and you were like, okay, this is gonna be a good game. It felt like they
We felt
had
really good
answers.
about our Mavs in 60.
I felt
Yeah,
so good. I
right.
felt so good. It felt like, oh yeah, these guys do have the answers to this incredible. But as the game wore on, there was a one where he jumped past out of a jumper to Derek Jones, and you're like, Kyrie,
Then he got
That's your-
stripped too
that's
one
your
of those games
bag.
as well. Yeah, one
that's
of
your
those plays.
bag. You got to shoot that. Yeah, it was a very strange game for Kyrie. And then as we were talking about it, I went and looked, and since he's left Boston, this is just the regular season. He's been a minus 56. This is just not a place that he plays very well.
And that's
They
where I
got the
was saying when
guys.
I thought it was something bigger than just the game at hand, right? Because he didn't look like the Kyrie we've seen all postseason long. He didn't look like the guy that doesn't necessarily have to reel off 20 straight points, but can play good defense, right? And can get guys into sets and also kind of offset Luka with some scoring. We saw none of that. And he just looked so his confidence was shook in this
Yeah,
game.
19,
That's the most concerning thing.
19
Yeah.
shots in this game, could not buy a bucket, 0 for 5 from 3, which is also concerning. But I think the most concerning thing for me was they had this halftime, or I guess it was just a sideline interview with him, and he was talking about how, these guys have been in the finals before, they have their footing, we're trying to find
Like you
our
hit the
footing.
biggest shot in NBA history in the finals. What are you
It
talking about?
It was like this weird. I was like, is he trolling
Yeah.
me right now in real time from the sideline? Where it was this mental gymnastics of like we're still just getting here. We're almost happy to be here. Is that concerning?
That's pretty concerning. The other thing, though, is that the thing that I going into the series that I banked on the Mavericks having was the killer instinct is the cliche word of it, but they had the attitude that I believed, right?
Yeah,
Where throughout the playoffs, Boston was dominant, but they had the curious losses, and that's something that really shook me. And I thought the Mavericks were going to be the ones to set the tone in this series, and it looked like they were going to do it in the first couple of minutes, and then you start seeing everything that we have criticized the Mavs of being the last few years, they were that, right? Where no one else is showing up but Luka in a game. They can't find offense outside of him. And then you see Lively getting in the foul trouble,
Right.
which was
Five
terrible.
fouls. Yeah,
also, I
terrible
think
fouls.
that was something that I saw, and I immediately went to Jason Kidd. Like, why aren't you taking him out? Even if you saw him after the third foul, why don't you take him out? Gafford, I don't have the minutes in front of me right now, but felt like Gafford should have gotten at least a little bit more minutes. I don't know what happened, what they saw matchup-wise, but there were a lot of concerning things. But the biggest thing was it looked like Luka and everybody else, and that was the differentiator for them in this postseason in that we didn't have that. You could have Kyrie having a night. You could have a PJ Washington night.
Right.
None of those guys showed up. They looked like the team that was flat-footed, and Boston took care of them.
Yeah, Luka 26 shots in this game, but 30 points.
And he looked
Yeah.
tired throughout
Right.
the series.
They're
throughout
picking him up
this
full
game.
court.
Yeah.
I mean, Jaylen Brown was doing what Lou Dort did. He's like, I'm going to turn him a couple times, make him tired, bringing the ball off the court, and obviously it had an impact later in the game.
Yeah.
So that was tough to see. I do want to talk. You mentioned the others, right? Luka, one of the others in the past was Kristaps Porzingis. Now he's on the other side, and he looked incredible in this game. A lot of conversations about how he could swing the series. He looked great in game one and looked like the Porzingis you want.
Yeah, I was really concerned just because anytime you hear a calf injury and just the way that calf injury
And
looked.
the way he talked about it, right? I mean, it was very strange.
There was a moment, I don't have the exact quote, but there was a moment when I think whoever the sideline reporter was tonight.
Lisa Salters.
When Lisa Salters had said something about her conversation with Porzingis, and I can't remember the verbiage, but it didn't look like he was very confident in that calf. As confident as I would want someone to feel in a finals game.
He said something about his lateral quickness, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes out and he's like the Porzingis that we saw in February, right? Where
30-foot
he's
threes.
hitting 30-foot threes and he's being a rim protector and he's being exactly what this Celtics team needs at this stage. And also what unlocks the Celtics to a whole nother level, to an historically great level defensively. And I thought he was fantastic tonight. I thought we could have even seen more of him, but it's hard to, implement a guy into the finals. But he was fantastic, Seerat.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also had Al Horford playing the way that he was, so you didn't necessarily need to go
How
to
old
him.
is Al
Like,
Horford? We had a running tally.
I mean,
last.
officially, I think he's 37.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, like a couple things on everything that you guys hit on. Daniel Gafford, 14 minutes, was 3 for 3. I don't know why we didn't see more of him, especially with Lively on tilt. And I think that it was kind of like an emotional sort of like trickle-down effect after Kyrie wasn't playing that well, because you think about that
And he's been the
sideline
leader
interview.
for
Yeah,
this team,
exactly. I
right.
think that's what he was trying to get at with that sideline interview of like, hey, look, a lot of these guys haven't been here. He has been their steady guy throughout the course of the playoffs. This game was such a stark contrast to game one against the Timberwolves for him, where he just like came out. He was like, I know that these guys have never been on the stage before. I need to set the tone, get them comfortable. The second that it was like, oh, he can't go, he's not playing that well, and Luka kind of, off the jump, he's in these switch situations on Horford. He's not scoring. But he's also not really able to get anybody else going, because if he can't beat you one-on-one, then it doesn't really force the Celtics to do anything else. No blitzing, no getting in rotation, nothing like that. And it really just felt like everybody else on the Mavericks from there, the lights felt really big. You mentioned Lively on tilt. Jaden Hardy is just like, I guess it's got to be
some
me
terrible
now,
shots,
Yeah,
right.
like,
Yeah, some grenades that came his way.
Well, the thing is, though, like you mentioned that about that was what I was talking about with the third quarter, right? Like when you see your guy Luka get it to within 8, you want to the other guys are starting to get giddier and giddier. And then I think that run just it collapsed because Kyrie wasn't taking the baton of scoring. We talked about that when we were watching the game, how concerning that was. And that's the thing on this stage. And Kyrie has purported himself to be that type of leader for these guys. And he has been in stretches throughout the postseason, right, where I think about in one of the series where he's telling Max Kleber, I think it was in the conference finals, get into the huddle, right? Like he is purported himself as being this leader guy, and they look to him as that. So when they see him off kilter, everybody else can't pick up the slack because they follow Kyrie now. And that's what I want to see from him in game 2. I want to see how he adjusts his leadership things and if he comes out with the fire, because it was really, really concerning how bad he was in game 1.
Was he spooked, I mean, by this whole situation mentally? I mean, is there a world? You mentioned like all the games against the Celtics. There has been something there where Kyrie has not been the Kyrie we've seen against other teams. Like, can he get over that mental hurdle? And if he does get over that hurdle, is that the way that this series kind of shifts back in favor of Dallas? I'll go to you, Seerat,
It has
for
to.
that. Right.
It has to. That's really their only way through, right? Like, especially if they're going to cover Luka the way they are and he doesn't solve that, which, I mean, that's not really a thing that I can say for sure. But if that doesn't happen, then they need some one-on-one Kyrie as well. And to me, it's just also, you know, we can talk about the mental side of it, but man, like you're dealing with Drew Holiday, you're dealing with Derek White.
The size.
The size has been tough for him. And, you know, I think from both of those guys, you could feel the Celtics defense was making them overthink. You also had a couple of those jump pass, like maybe I've got a floater here for Luka that he throws into some forced lobs. There were some corner threes that he was pitching out there, and on a night that the Mavericks role players really just weren't really even on their closeout attacks. Those guys, I mean, Kleber had 2 wide open threes that he didn't want any part of the ball,
and that kind of shows your hand, right? Is his shoulder healthy if he's not willing to take that shot?
Well, that's the tricky part about how the Dallas Mavericks are constructed, right? They are constructed around 2 high-octane scorers, and when those scorers aren't at where they're supposed to be, there's no ancillary pieces, right? Like even P.J. Washington, who has had success.
We got Tim Hardaway minutes.
We got Tim Hardaway minutes.
Microwave,
but even like P.J. Washington, he gets a lot of his shots off the catch in this offense. He's not like the Charlotte Hornets P.J. Washington who can get it off the dribble.
You collapse,
right?
Luka kicks, I hit a wide open 3.
Exactly. And when the 2 guys aren't going, it's going to be tough. And if they can't get going, and I told you this after this game, it could be a really fast series if they can't get going consistently. And this is the Celtics they've shown who they are time and time again, and their defense is tailor-fitted to guard against Luka and Kyrie. If it's a Luka and Kyrie-centric offense, they are tailor-made to defend that offense.
And now we're in a situation as we kind of forecast the series. Obviously, game 1 is overreaction central. Everybody's going to come out. I mean, even at halftime, people were tweeting, does this even get to 5 games? Yeah. I mean, that's just what happens in these circles. But, I mean, is there an overreaction that does feel sensible at this point where it's like the Celtics are in complete control of this series, or is it something where the Dallas Mavericks can make adjustments, Derek Lively can play, more sensibly, and they can win game 2, and we're all okay?
Look, these were the 2 highest volume 3-point shooting teams in the NBA last season.
A lot of variance, right? That's going to be the word.
We have to accept that, right? Like, it's 25.9% from the Mavericks and 38% from the Celtics.
That's insane.
Those numbers could easily flip themselves in game 2, right? There were a number of variables that I think might just, I think maybe some of these guys need to get their feet wet. There's also, I don't want to troll the Celtics on a night like this, but they're up. Gonna be raucous game 2 crowd,
right? And we've seen them play with their food before, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the argument. We've seen the Celtics be the better team
in this postseason,
but lose games.
Yeah,
right.
This is like you could get a flip of like in round 1 where you have Miami Heat just come out and they hit a historic amount of 3-pointers in game 2, and you're like, oh God, is this going to somehow be a series? Now it wasn't, but this series. You got guys like Luka, you got guys like Kyrie. So, to your point, you can't play with your food. You got to take it seriously. But I will say, watching some of the pregame press conferences, especially Jason Tatum on media day, there was a level of calm that he had that I'd never really seen from him before. And it does sort of speak to, we always talk about experience, and it feels like a cliche, but I feel like that's actually been the story of the playoffs so far. It's one of the bigger reasons why Dallas beat the Timberwolves, right? We talked about them as like, okay, it was kind of like, they flipped position from being the team that lost in the Western Conference Finals to the Warriors. Now they know what to do here. Now it feels like, oh, they're kind of in the role that the Celtics were in, where the lights felt a little bit bright and they didn't quite know what they were doing. And the experienced team that had been there a number of times, totally found every possible way to capitalize on that.
The thing I do like, to just build on that point, I know Jason Tatum is going to get a lot of slack for this.
Yeah,
but I do like the fact that he is playing in the cut in this way, right, where he is letting Jaylen Brown, kind of cook and be that number one option and be that guy for this team to succeed. And I think that because throughout their tenure together, it has always been, well, who's going to take that number one spot? Who's going to do this? Who is the guy in Boston? It was even a conversation. We were watching the game with Isaiah Blakely, who was on pins and needles throughout the game, telling a lot of "I told you so"s, even when the Celtics were getting beat in the third quarter for that time.
He's fighting straw men everywhere.
But I do like the fact that he is taking that backseat. That shows a level of maturity, right? And that can be a positive for this team. I do want to see when they do need him, when the Celtics do need Jason to meet that moment. I'm curious to see what he does with it, because there has been times where, and we've talked about that even tonight.
Yeah, so look, here's the thing, though, with that. The way I think about it is they need to continue just going down that road that you're talking about, where Jason Tatum continues to relinquish his ego. I think the more that they can move away from the basketball orthodoxy of the best player.
But I don't even know if it's even just the ego thing. It's kind of just even what's been bestowed onto him in Boston.
Yeah,
right? He is the guy.
Yeah, it's more of the basketball orthodoxy of it,
Yeah.
right?
You're the
best,
alpha,
exactly,
you're the number
you're the best
two,
player.
right.
And I feel like when I watch them in crunch time sometimes, they are trying to set up the advantage for Jason Tatum. We saw this over and over again in the Pacers series, where in reality it was actually Derek White, and Josh Hart made that point. And then he made a counterpoint after that saying, just because I'm saying Derek White is their best crunch time player, that doesn't mean I'm diminishing Jason Tatum.
Right.
So I think
the
it's
attention
almost
is going to Tatum, therefore Derek can take and step into that space.
And that's what that's
and
what a number one, that's the next level of what a number
gravity,
one is,
right?
right? Yeah.
Exactly. But I do think that if we change the way that we talked about Jason Tatum, I think that would kind of help him sort of find his right place on the court. And I think we've been seeing it happen throughout the course of the playoffs, whether it's Jaylen Brown.
Do you think we bestowed the number one option onto Jason Tatum too soon? In that way?
I think it's just a natural thing that we do, and I think it's something that he played into himself with all the Kobe stuff. It's a guy that he wants to be. Every kid, everybody, and I think there is, I said ego, but I think that's part of it. I think that there is a certain sort of I'm supposed to be the guy, and you put that pressure on yourself, and you say, well, that's the next step.
And that's coming too. Even if, say, the Celtics win and Jason Tatum or Porzingis gets Finals MVP, there's going to be that talk no matter what.
Absolutely.
Right? It's going to happen. So the key is to see how Jason would respond to that. If he responds I don't care, I want to win a title. That's good. That's probably that's how it should be.
And the good news is he got his training wheels right in the Eastern Conference Finals. He just watched Jaylen Brown win the Finals MVP, and Drew Holiday was in consideration as well. And the media kind of tried to dissect that, but by all accounts, Tatum was like, "I'm happy for him." You know what I mean? He's like, "I win everything. It's about time he won something." Which is that's a fair way to look at it. It doesn't have to be alpha, beta, omega situation. It's like this is what we are. And if you look at the economy of shots just in this game, it's like Tatum's 15 shots, Jaylen Brown's 14 shots, Porzingis is 11 shots, right? It's not that Tatum's taking 20, Jaylen, you get your 12, you get your 8, right? It is kind of spread out amongst those 4 or 5
because
guys.
When you get with the Celtics, and also when we talk about star players in general, it's meeting the moment can mean totally different things, right? It can mean, okay, I need 16 assists tonight. Right. I need to, whatever the game requires, you do that. And
10 rebounds for Tatum in this game, offensive rebounds.
And so, if he continues to do that, he will still be the number one guy. He will still do all these things and get all of the credit for being that. But it takes that next level. You don't have to score 45 every night. And he might need to score 45 in the series to win a game.
Some nights, but you don't need to be the guy that's taking the pull-up 3 in the last 2 minutes of the game. We don't need to see that, right?
Or have a number in your head where you're like, I need to take 20 shots, which I feel like he used to almost play that way. He was like, I need
and that's kind of what messed him up in the 2022 finals, right? Where he felt like he needed that. He took on a lot in the 2022 finals, and that was a big learning experience, but he felt like he needed to take on all of that because that's...
You see Steph over here being Superman, and he's like, oh, I should put my cape on.
And when Steph won his first finals MVP?
Yeah, when
that series.
That series,
right?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
What a lesson for Jason Tatum and for the Boston Celtics because they are comfortable. I just want to look ahead to Game 2. We obviously get a little bit of rest. Some people are now talking about Luka maybe had too much rest. But what's one change that the Mavericks can make? Seerat, I'll start with you. One change that the Mavericks can make potentially for Game 2. Maybe it's just getting lively under control.
Beyond the obvious of Kyrie playing better, Luka playing better, I think one thing I'd actually love to see is seeing some Gafford on Drew Holiday. They love using him in the dunker spot. I would throw him down there, try to neutralize that a little bit because the way that they do things right now with that matchup being regular, you get a small down there, and then it's just a layup line for a guy like Jaylen Brown.
Right.
So maybe if you can find a way that you don't necessarily have to go to a zone, I think that he can handle him on a switch. I don't know that, it's maybe not something that's tenable for an entire game, but I'd like to see some minutes of that.
But
and
also,
then
like,
maybe
if you
try
see-
PJ on Kristaps Porzingis instead.
Yeah, right.
Also,
I
like
that.
if you see, like if you do that, which I think is a really good point by you, but and if you do that, if you put Gafford on Drew Holiday and you make Drew Holiday say, "Oh, I want to do a pick and roll," that's what you want. You would want that. Like, okay, that's taken away.
You created
take
it.
him out.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fine. Go take me pick and roll. That,
I mean,
that
that's
takes
the playoffs.
touches.
You dictate what you do, right? It's
Yeah,
like, I'm
yeah.
going to make you play a certain way by doing this, right? And I think that's the other part of this is where I do think Kidd has been great with adjustments, and Mazzulla has been very stubborn with adjustments. So I feel like Kidd will make the first move, and then we'll see what Boston does to respond to that. Do you have a move that maybe Dallas could make?
I think Kyrie just needs to play better, man. I
I
think
think
that it'll. The move that they need to make is him playing better because they play well when their two stars play well, right? They take on all of the role players take on a great personality when their stars play well. You saw it in the third quarter. If they can just stars need to be stars in this series, and Dallas needs their stars.
They also just need more out of their front court in general.
Right.
That's a big thing. I assume
Lively
going into this-
has been great. I mean, for a rookie. I mean, obviously they kind of tanked for Lively, so there's some karmic, something in the air with that situation. But he was atrocious tonight. Almost got teed up on that fifth foul. I mean,
Should've.
you saw Garbo was kind of doing the
not to be the cops right now.
Yeah, he's like, am I gonna have to tee this?
But
kid
I think
up?
also, like, even to that point, Jason Kidd has to do better with his subs. If you see your best frontline defender getting into foul trouble, take him out real quick.
Right.
Make sure he's good. Like he got 3 straight fouls in a span of like 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
and then they were
That
bad,
was a backbreaker right there.
Yeah, and
So
that fourth one you said, it was clear.
Yeah.
Like he was on tilt. Just
Yeah.
get him out of there.
Yeah.
Give him a minute.
And he's just yelling and he's going crazy. So I started doing this after the 2017 finals because I feel like he had to. Right now, like who is the MVP of this game? So like as we're moving towards finals MVP, I would say Jaylen Brown. I'll start. I feel like Jaylen Brown to me would be number one on the board. Had a great game defensively, had that huge dunk, just really stood out on both sides of the court. So I would say Jaylen Brown. I'm sure there will be some arguments, one way or the other. Luka was great as well. But is there anyone that was the MVP of this game for you?
I want to say Porzingis just to differentiate from you, but I'll say Jaylen Brown because I do want to take this opportunity to just talk about how big Jaylen Brown has been for this team.
Right.
Also how big, one of the question marks that I had for going into this series was where were they going to find the toughness, right? Like who was going to be the player for us to believe their raps, right? And we talked about even in the theater when we were talking during the game was, the absence of Marcus Smart and who is that guy that has replaced him.
Who sets that tone?
Who sets that tone? And it's been Jaylen Brown, and it's been really impressive to see because we're seeing the maturation of him and how he's grown over the last 2 years since they've last been in the finals. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit. That dunk on Gafford was amazing, but it set the tone. That's something that number one options do, right? You don't say you're a number one option. You go out there and prove it. And that's something that he's been doing a great job of throughout the playoffs is setting the tone for this team, the emotional tone, but also the physical tone when you're dunking on a guy like that.
Yeah, I mean, I got
It's a clean sweep.
Yeah, 3-0 Jaylen Brown. Who would have
Yeah,
thought? Yeah. Big win for Jaylen Brown. You know what I mean?
Huge-
But we
sub,
should,
huge
if
sub.
it's going to be
We got-
Jaylen, we should also talk about Porzingis
We got to
too.
talk about KP as well. The only other thing I'd add on Jaylen is I loved how aggressive he was and how much he made Luka work. Like he put him in the blender over and over again. Like there were a couple times when Luka was just trying to draw some charges and it was like, dude, no, you got it. I'm gonna make you move your feet. I'm gonna make you move your feet.
I'm gonna turn you a couple
There was
times.
another thing we were talking about before the game, and I was very curious to see, because I know that Raja Bell, I do a podcast called
shout
Real
out
Ones.
to
Make sure you
Raja,
guys listen to Real Ones. But Raja was talking about how Jaylen Brown should be the primary defender on Luka, and I had pause on that because I was like, well, if he's the best wing defender and he's guarding the other best wing, what is he going to have on offense, right? And he was so good at being a two-way player in this game, and just that was a strip that we saw that led right
strip
into the dunk.
On Luka that was the one.
It was great, and I think that if he can continue to do something like do that and continue to be that type of player, it's going to be a short series because. No one's been able to truly guard Luka, but I think that Jaylen has done the best job thus far, at least one game sample size.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that we'll also get some other looks on Luka. The one thing I would say is just looking over at some of the regular season stuff, I know it's not playoff level intensity, but I was surprised at how hard it was for Luka because even usually when he plays the Celtics, like he can get him out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Like this was a little bit surprising, and I do wonder, like you know, to your point of is he going to be able to do both? I think one thing about when you have been to the finals, the biggest, I can't say biggest, but one of the biggest things that you learn is just how exhausting it is to be this far and then have to go play the best basketball of your life.
Well, that was the difference in the 2022 finals because you saw a lot of Celtics just being gassed at the prospect of just continuing to play, and they were a big reason why they lost down in that as the series went on is because they were so tired.
Exactly, and now I'm wondering if this is a lesson that Dallas actually needs to learn.
Because Luka was gassed.
Yeah.
We were talking.
There's levels of conditioning, and Jaylen Brown is right now looking at the peak level, and Luka looks like he's needs a gas mask. And the Minnesota Timberwolves just showed us that in the last. Once they made it to the Western Conference Finals, Anthony Edwards is gasping for air. And you know what I mean? Like that next level, until you've gotten there, it's hard to really get there.
And it's cliche to say, but that's the mental aspect of it, right? When people say how hard it is to win a title, obviously it takes timing and the right matchups, but you have to be conditioned to play into June and beyond. And that's the lesson that the Mavericks are learning.
Yeah.
And I do think we have a long series ahead. I don't think it's over. I know a lot of people, are fired up right now about what's happening. One last thing before we get out of here. I know we're talking about this series. We're going to be back. We're going to be doing this after all the games. We have to talk about the Los Angeles Lakers. They have done a fantastic job of inserting themselves into the narrative.
The Laker way, baby.
Yes.
Honestly, just a LeBron-esque way of diverting
Joey's
attention.
in the back right now. He's celebrating. He has a JJ Redick Clippers jersey on. No, I'm just kidding. What do we think?
It's the one from Clipped.
The original from Clipped. What do we think, Logan, when you see that report? Dan Hurley is getting the call from the Lakers. Now we got a war between Dan Hurley, JJ Redick. We got Shams versus Woj. Like, what is going on in Lakerland?
It's a battle of wills, right? When you can see it's LeBron's will versus the will of the Los Angeles Lakers, and I think that's something that's going to be really interesting to play out. Just the politics of all of this, right? Because I think when LeBron came in 2018, I always talk about this on the pod. It was the first team that met his match in terms of celebrity, in terms of power, in terms of leverage, and
brand
all of those things, right? Like you're LeBron, but we're the Lakers, and you're going to continue to see that clash as LeBron gets longer in the tooth and. LeBron, he has leverage, but he's also like year 27, right? Like he
doesn't have 2013 leverage.
He also can be a free agent. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but like LeBron and free agency in 2024 just don't hit the same as 2014, right? So I think it's going to be interesting to see just how the power dynamic between these two entities and how they call each other's bluff. But in terms of the coaching hire, if I'm Dan Hurley, I'm just taking a free trip to L.A. And I'm taking my ass back to stores and getting to the bag.
Yeah, the L.A. of the East Coast is what everyone calls it.
Because it doesn't matter what they say.
People do say that.
If Dan Hurley or JJ Redick comes, they're tethered to LeBron, and they're not going to be in LA long. It doesn't matter what smoke screens you say. It's going to be a year, 2 years tops. It doesn't matter how much money is thrown at that. Stay in stores. Go win you another national championship. It ain't that serious. Go get your leverage to get to the bag. Exactly. Go get paid.
Raise that contract.
I don't think that if Dan Hurley ends up in LA that he is going to be that easy to kick out the door. We talked about all of this, this Lakers exceptionalism, this brand power. I mean, Dan Hurley, as far as brand power in basketball goes right now, he's near the top. You know, especially like after what he did at UConn, just the way that everybody loves that offense.
And he's like,
just
it's like being a
he's
Kennedy or
guy.
Clinton or something. You know what I mean?
Right,
He's got the
basketball
prestige.
name,
Right.
Yeah. He's
But
got
that
all
also-
of that.
but
So
he-
it becomes like a third power player in this situation.
Yeah, but he's also going to the pros. He has that leverage as long as he's in the college ranks, right? Like we talked about this before we got on. Like Coach K made a lot of money just dangling his feet in the NBA waters, right?
Right.
You
Coach
have
K-
that leverage when you're
Yeah.
in college, but once you're in the pros, you're just another coach that ain't proved a damn thing. So I don't think that
I don't know. I think times have changed.
I do
I
think
think-
if Hurley came here, he would come under the guys that he's working with, Pelinka and the Bus family.
Yeah.
And LeBron is like either he gets in where he fits in or he's out. You know what I mean? And I think that would be the fascinating situation to see who saddles up with who. Does LeBron say, okay, if that's your move, you're not going to hire my guy. I'm out. You know what I mean? And then
I'm taking Bronny
and
with
I'm
me.
taking Bronny with me.
And you know what the Lakers are gonna say? Okay.
Yeah, right.
Bye.
Yeah, literally. Okay. And then Dan Hurley, maybe he could build a culture. I think it's still a play to get him some more money.
The
with
question
UConn.
though is this though, right? If they do get Dan Hurley and LeBron says this is BS and I'm out, where does that leave Anthony Davis?
I think he's happy. I think Anthony Davis is deep down. He's like, if it's someone that's not picked by LeBron, at least it's kind of my coach. You know what I
Sure.
mean? Like I have some.
But there's
sort of
still the
collective-
clutch element of it, right?
Yes, of course.
There's
right.
there's a clutch.
There's
element of
always
it.
the element. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Anthony Davis, like there were a couple moments in that Lakers season where LeBron's in one press conference, Anthony Davis is in the other, and he was just like LeBron's being passive aggressive, and Anthony Davis is like, yeah, we just got to stay together as a team right now. I think that would be great.
He's yelling it into the microphone. Everyone's like, yeah, we hear. We hear what you're saying, Anthony.
Yelled it out like a hostage.
Yeah.
We need to stay together.
Yeah.
Can
No,
someone transcribe this and send it to LeBron, please? Yeah.
No, I know. I know that it's a lot. It probably is just not going to happen. But at the end of the day, I actually think that it'd be a really interesting hire for the Lakers. Like the way that I think
It'd be a
about
very
this,
forward-thinking
it
hire.
would be, and I
yeah.
think the way that, and also it would I think that they probably want to get away from this narrative that they won't pay coaches as well. So like I imagine that even
And then they
if
have
it
no
is,
culture. They're
even if-
mercenary culture at this point.
exactly, even if it is a smokescreen, it's like, hey, we offered him a ton of money, so like we tried to go out and get him. Allows them to win the PR battle there, even if they then go and hire like a first-time coach in JJ Redick. They can at least say that, and I feel like that's kind of what they're doing with this whole interview process. Like they are interviewing everybody right
Yeah,
now.
and telling
I mean,
everybody.
You got you did you get
Right.
that from your Lakers interview?
Yeah. I went in there. I was like, I got a shot. I'm a podcaster too. Give me a chance. Last thing on this, then we'll get out of here. Is JJ Redick upset about this report when he sees this? Like he sees Woj swoops in and says that they don't care about anybody else but Hurley. Is JJ Redick feeling some type of way?
Probably.
But he's calling the NBA Finals. You know what I mean? So he's got to do a good job of kind of keeping his emotions out of the equation, at least for now.
That just shows how wild this business is. But I will say this: if JJ Redick is the coach next year, I'm seeing Jomi just having tears in his eyes. But
He's crying.
if JJ Redick is the coach next year, it's basically a wasted year. I'll say that right now. It just is. Like he's not going to have. He's going to have parcel of the locker room, maybe one person, and he's not going to have trust in that locker room. It's going to be a very weird, just vibes the whole time around. Right? It's not going to be a fun environment to be a Laker in that stretch because there's just the battle lines will be drawn as soon as JJ Redick is hired, if he is hired. But it's not going to be a fun time. I know I'm saying this. I'm sure there's some Laker people watching this. You shouldn't do this.
Don't do it.
Don't
You're
do it,
saying
guys.
don't do this. How
Don't
do
do
How do
this.
you feel about JJ? When you close your eyes, do you see JJ Redick, the next Lakers head coach, or do you say that still seems insane?
No.
I
Better
think it's
question. Do you see the next Pat Riley?
Yeah. Yes. Young Pat Riley.
I think it's either the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world. And I think that philosophically, it's kind of the same thing with Dan Hurley. Like I look at both of these potential hires, and I look at who they've interviewed, and I look at it like, and it's like, okay, the best guy that you could probably hire right now that is a safe bet, that is going to be a good player development guy, which is, I think, really important to the Lakers because
Especially if they
LeBron's
draft
getting older,
Bronny. Yeah.
and if they draft Bronny. But they had a bunch of young guys that just didn't really, like a guy like Max Christie. Can he make the leap? Can he actually be a guy for
It's
them?
a great name. Yeah.
That's that's kind of their biggest pathway to genuine improvement.
And then
right
if you
now,
get
right?
if you get JJ Redick, it's only tethered to LeBron, so
Right.
you're not gonna have that player development at all.
So I think obviously Hurley is a very interesting name, but he's also somebody who has he's a big personality. He's screaming at referees all the time. There's just ways that he can't. You also the way that I love his whole thing, but it's an 82 game season. You can't burn the candle on both ends like that, not with professional players. So he's gonna have to figure that part out.
The burnout would be the problem. That would be the real issue.
It would be for everybody involved. But I look at it and I'm like, okay, your best hire from a player development experience, all that stuff standpoint is probably Kenny Atkinson. But it doesn't make you that excited. So, and the Lakers like to hire guys
like
that
the
make people
headlines,
excited.
right.
So they're gonna want to go for somebody that can either end up completely flaming out and it doesn't work out, or it's like, oh, we got our next Eric Spoelstra, we got our next Pat Riley, we got the guy who is going to be a coach with a genuine level of gravitas, we got our next Phil Jackson. And
or Brad Stevens, right, with the Celtics. I mean, who knows if Hurley comes there, he coaches for a few years and says, I don't really like coaching the NBA, but I do like locating and finding guys I can develop into certain players. He bumps up, but you know what I mean? There are paths.
But the thing is with the Lakers, it's too many agendas in that.
Right.
In that front
look
office,
at the
right?
search.
Because you just said that, right? You just said Dan Hurley can maybe do a Brad Stevens type role and graduate into that. What does Rob Pelinka think about that, right? And then you have the LeBron thing where LeBron, just by his sheer presence, undermines any type of agenda that a coach has, and it's through no fault of his own. It just is what it is.
It's a little bit of a fault of his own.
It's a little bit. I was just trying to no, but it is he undermines any agenda that a coach has, and that's why this Lakers job is so bad on paper, because you would want to develop a team, right? But then you have LeBron, who says at least now he wants to win now, despite what his regular season records have been over the last couple of years and how he's played in such regular seasons. But I don't feel I think that no matter who is hired or not hired, the LeBron element is always going to be something that is an Achilles heel for them. Yeah. No matter what. So this just got depressing. This has got really depressing. Sorry, Joan.
Got dark. Yeah, it really got really dark.
I don't think it ever makes it a bad job, though. I think I've heard that a lot. Who would want to coach the Lakers? Anybody. Forget the fact that there's only 30 of these jobs, but these guys that get on this level, they're not wired to think like that. They're not wired to be like,
JJ is wired to think he can fix it. Right,
exactly. Yeah. There's going to be a huge spotlight, and it's going to be, it's going to be really hard, and it's either going to be, it's going to be humiliation or glory. Let me step into this. I'm your guy.
But I understand that. But why, for that argument, then why didn't Coach Bud go to the Lakers?
Well, did they? I don't think that was.
He might be wise. He might be wise enough to know. The difference.
That's what I'm saying. So that,
I think
I don't think everybody.
I think the ignorance is a part of the allure of this whole thing. It's I can sell you on the dream, therefore you could be the dream.
If every coach
is that why they keep hiring first time guys?
Right.
If every coach wanted to coach the Lakers, then there would be so many established guys in the running of those jobs, right? There's a reason why they try to get young guys.
Well, no, it's because they're cheap. I don't think it's because they can't go out and get them. I think they could go out and get them if they were willing to pay for them.
They're in the LeBron business, which is every year LeBron resets the table. You know what I mean? Every year is a different conversation. Every year is, well, this guy who we loved last year, Austin Reeves, for example, now he's tradable. You know what I mean? It's the things change every year to year, and that's why I feel like these coaches are basically on 1 year deals. I mean, that's
not only are they cheap. I mean, they have the reputation of, and this goes back to LeBron again, of you will only have a certain amount of time to make an impression, or even if you're good, you're still going to fall by the wayside. Oh, hey, hello, Coach Vogel. Nice to see you. Yeah. But that's also reputationally what this Lakers job is and what it's always going to be as long as LeBron is there. Yeah. A team that, we might like you, right now for a couple of weeks, we want, or maybe even a year. But if you do something that is counterproductive to LeBron's chances of winning, you're out of here.
Right.
I mean, Darvin Ham took them to the conference finals.
I will say, I know the one knock on Ham that people said was about the work ethic or whatever. I mean, if that is the knock, which I don't know how true that is, Dan Hurley is maniacal, I mean, at every level. JJ Redick, based on the podcast I've watched, he seems pretty maniacal. It does seem like they'll get someone in the building that will grind the tape, that will, be in those meetings, that will be proactive. That's encouraging. But it is true that Darvin Ham went to the Western Conference Finals and got fired. Frank Vogel won an NBA championship and got fired. I mean, that does hurt.
I don't know if I could put Vogel and Ham in the same sentence as far as that issue goes. So
right.
I think there are plenty of knocks on Ham's job this year.
Of course. I mean,
And
the hands in the pocket is probably the most blatant one. Get the hands out of the pocket.
In perpetuity, just for the sake of the image, my guy.
Dan Hurley's got his hands out of his pocket in a fist, and he's going to fight Zach Garba. I mean, that's...
One thing I got to say about JJ, last Mind Game podcast, no backwards hat, slick back hair.
Yeah.
He's thinking about the Hollywood
He's thinking
about
lifestyle.
Colin
He's getting
Cowherd.
ready.
He's a coward.
He's gonna have he's gonna have a fun
That
1 year in
slick
Los
back
Angeles.
Pat Riley haircut.
Yeah, everyone's like, is that young Riley? Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is that if it all goes bad, they can make a Hulu series, and JJ's already got someone that plays him in that, so he's already got an actor to cast for him. Last thing before we go, Logan, any predictions on the series? Do you still feel good about I was Mavs in 7 guy. Have you changed your prediction after what you've seen? Do you feel good?
Can't do it. Mavs in 6.
Mavs in 6.
I had Mavs in 7. I'm not going to change it.
Okay, Mavs.
Give us a couple games.
Couple games, but right now Celtics, they win game 1. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We will be doing this after every single game in the NBA Finals going live on the Ringer YouTube channel. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you Sunday night. Logan will be back. He's going to fly back to the Bay and back here, and then Seerat will have her back as we get through the rest of the series. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see you on Sunday night.